Hey guys, Stockaholics, thank you guys for being here today. I'm going to talk a little bit more about A2 milk today. The reason I wanted to talk about this is because I see this recurring bear thesis from both retail and professional investors, and I'm going to show a clip showing one of those in a second, where there's this thesis that says, okay, well, A2 milk is in some trouble because of declining birth rates in China. And I completely disagree with this thesis, not because of the birth rates, but because they oversimplify the situation. So that's what I'm going to talk about in this video. But first, I would like to show you the bear thesis.
Yes.
This week, we're also hearing about some stocks not on the experts watch list.
Yes, and we will start with them, but it is our pleasure to welcome Julia Lee from Berman Invest back onto Equity Mates. Julia, welcome.
Great to be here. Thanks, guys.
So, as Alex said, we traditionally keep this to 3 stocks that are on your watch list, but today, Julia, you snuck in a couple that you have your eyes on for other reasons, and I think we'll start with those. And those 2 stocks are Baby Bunting and A2 Milk. What is going on there? Why are they not on your watch list?
I guess, Bryce, when I look at different stocks, often what I'm looking for is an underlying trend, whether it's a structural trend or a cyclical trend. And this one, I guess, is the baby trend. I'm sure during lockdown and COVID-19, all of us know probably someone who's had a baby. So there's lots of stories around us of people having babies, and it may feel like we're reducing a lot of babies, but in fact it's been the opposite, and the birth rate has been declining. Not only here in Australia, but a lot of major economies like China, Hong Kong, a lot of the European nations as well. So I guess the big question is, how does that impact on individual stocks? Now, I try to think about the birth rate a little bit more, because I was finding it a bit confusing, because there are quite a few people around me actually having babies. And I thought about it, I thought it's those couples that were already together intending to have babies that are probably having the babies because they had the time in lockdown. But what if you were a single? There's been less opportunities to meet other people in places like bars, because during lockdown, you actually had to sit down at a table, you weren't allowed to carry your drink around and mingle. Now, some of those conditions are lifting, but over the last year, it does look like the birth rate has been quite low. And in fact, what COVID-19 has done is it accelerated that trend that's already been present, that in a lot of the advanced economies, the birth rate has been declining and fertility has been declining as well. So look, Baby Bunting has been reporting well, and actually the share price has been doing extremely well. But given the risks of that birth rate, I wouldn't have it in my portfolio at the moment. The same with A2 Milk. You might see that debut channel starting to open up. But the risk there is that the market has shrunk and more competition in that space. So they're 2 stocks I'm avoiding for the time being.
And one of the problems I have with this argument is that she seems to be arguing that there is a permanence because of the COVID. She mentions that it's accelerating the decline in birth rates in developed economies. To me, this is kind of and I'm going to be making some wide assumptions too, but I think it's a pretty big assumption. It's assuming that what I believe to be a temporary event, the cerveza sickness, and the subsequent lockdowns and all kinds of these developed economies, China included, is going to lead to a more decline in birth rates. And to me, I don't really see this as the case, because at some point in the very near future, I believe, is that we are seeing more and more developed economies opening back up. They're becoming vaccinated. There'll be more of these mingling events happening in bars and that and that's going to lead to more relationships. And what is the likely result of that? Babies. And what is the likely effect of more babies being born? That is more sales in infant formula. Why infant formula sales in China are just getting started: an offensive misunderstanding of culture and human behavior by Stockaholics. So just like I believe many analysts may be oversimplifying the situation in this video, I think some people may interpret to be over complicating some of this situation too. So you guys let me know if I'm going down some rabbit holes, if this is just all some BS that I'm coming up with. I'd be happy to hear any criticism in the comments below. Okay, so I think this is the core of what a lot of the analysts are missing. So I don't disagree. I think, yes, birth rates in China, they're going to continue to decline. But I think what a lot of these analysts, they don't consider is that there's another variable that's very important for infant formula sales, and that is standard of living. So I've created this beautiful and amazing chart for you all today to kind of emphasize how I see the whole situation. So this is the standard of living versus babies born and its effect on infant formula sales. So as standard of living increases, that is a force that will increase the overall sales of infant formula, which all the analysts seem to miss. And what the analysts get correct is that as over time, the babies being born in China, like other developed economies, that decreases to the potential customer base for your formula. Now, the way I see this is that there is these variables interacting in an X-like format, as you can see. And I think what a lot of people are missing is that a lot of China lives in poverty, right? So I think we are somewhere down here. Yes, there's going to be a decline in birth rates, and yes, at some point that is going to limit how much infant formula can be sold, but you need to take into account it doesn't really matter if birth rates are declining if there are large segments of your population that can't afford infant formula, right? So as we get to the economy and the standard of living increases, we're ultimately going to reach a peak formula sales point, but we are nowhere near that. And I'm going to argue that in the next few slides. All right, so there's this argument that, the trend of birth rates is the trend to pay attention to. They don't pay attention to the trend of economic growth. So we will talk a little bit about that. First of all, this is China posting record growth 12 months after historic slump. This is a chart from Statistica. And you can see that there has been significant GDP growth in China for the last 30 or so years on this chart, right? Now, there is some key points as well on this chart. Last year, there was a huge slump in economic growth. And to be expected, if you look at almost every economy, there's a few exceptions in the world, but if you look at almost every economy in the world, there was significant drops because of the cerveza sickness, right? On the flip side, you can see that China has just seen, since this dip, tremendous growth. And this is not paralleled in most of the world. So what I'm really trying to show you is that China, it continues to grow. And as China continues to grow, this money is going to find its way into poverty-stricken areas. In fact, I think that there's an incentive both from the general populace as well as leadership for this to happen. A huge wealth divide in any nation is bad news bears for social stability. So the leadership, yes, they could dictate a significant portion of the economy, but they're on the side of the overall population. They want poverty to be reduced, just as the people in poverty want it to be reduced. Okay, so this is an article called "China Claims It Has Eliminated Poverty, But It Is True." And the context of this is that they're measuring poverty by the World Bank standards. Okay, so Hong Kong. Over the past 8 years, some 100 million people in rural China have emerged from poverty, a sign of economic progress trumpeted by President Xi Jinping. Xi launched an initiative after taking power in 2012 that has helped China beat the 2030 target for eliminating extreme poverty set by the World Bank. The People's Daily, official newspaper of the Chinese Communist Party, called the elimination of poverty a historic leap. Xi has stood at the strategic height of building a well-off society in an all-around way, the newspaper said. The report pointed to the propaganda value to Xi in an economic advance that some suggest may be based in part on fudging the numbers. He has an incentive to make it believe that some of these, just like many governments around the world, like the same thing is true with, I think, what is it, the CPI in the United States. Anyway, in any case, but yes, so the governments, and especially Chinese Communist Party, yes, they're very likely to fudge some of these numbers. But anyway, at a ceremony on Thursday beamed to millions by official media, Xi said that China had invested 1.6 trillion won, or about 246 billion, in fighting poverty over the past 8 years. Beijing continues to use World Bank standards for the world's poorest nations, even though it is classified as an upper middle class country. China defines extreme rural poverty as annual per capita income of less than $620, or about $1.69 a day at current exchange rates, according to Reuters. That compares to the World Bank's global threshold of $1.90. So whether or not this poverty has been, quote, alleviated, there's still a tremendous room for these people to be, their standards of living to reach the same kind of standards of living that exist in a lot of the cities in China, right? And it's clear to me that raising people out of poverty remains leadership in China's one of their foremost goals. And I think that there's very likely going to be hundreds of millions of people lifted not only out of poverty, but into other classes that could afford products like infant formula in the coming decade. Okay, so this is where it gets a little bit more interesting. And I promise you this is going somewhere. This is where I think that it's this video is likely to become offensive to a lot of people, but I'm going to talk about it anyway because I believe it is true. So this is a brief understanding of hypergamy. This is going somewhere, I promise. So if you're looking at this chart, what I'm trying to show you is that there is a general human behavior in relationships, regardless of society, but I believe especially in China, where women, they tend to date and engage in relationships with men that are of a higher social caliber than themselves. So what this chart is showing you, for example, if you are in the bottom 40% of a social hierarchy in society, well, for a male, your best chance is that you're going to be dating and engaging in relationships with women that are in the same category. That's your best chance, right? But the same is not true for women. So the bottom 40% can engage with tiers of men that are of a higher caliber than themselves, right? Now, if you look at some of the higher tiers in this chart, for example, the highest caliber of men tend to want to date the highest caliber of women and vice versa, but the highest caliber of men are willing to date lower than the highest caliber of women. And this is true for almost every tier. And the pattern here is that women, they want to date men that are of a higher social caliber than themselves. This is social science. This is a fact in most cultures, if not all. I haven't seen a culture where it's not true. And I know that it is true in China as well. And if you don't believe what I'm saying is true, you can take this lovely Chinese woman's word for it.
Hi, it's Yuqi. Welcome to iDate Advice. If you're confused by Chinese women's dating preference, then this is the right video for you. Now we are going to look at what Chinese women are looking for in men. Chinese women like ambitious men. Chinese women are quite ambitious themselves, so they prefer ambitious men. But that doesn't mean you have to be a multimillionaire if you want to date Chinese women. You just need to let her know that your future is promising and you have a big blueprint. ambitious men are attractive men. Chinese women like good-looking men. Many Chinese women are very fashion conscious, so they expect their partner to be compatible as well. Choose a style you like. If you're already a handsome man, then you don't have to worry too much about your clothes. Chinese women like assertive men. A lot of Chinese girls are happy to be submissive in relationships because they prefer assertive men. The story of 50 Shades of Grey is actually the real-life situation for many Chinese women. So you should be the leader in the relationship and be assertive and firm. But it doesn't mean you should be lewd. You still need to be polite and gentle. In other words, the way you talk is polite and gentle, but what you say is assertive and firm. Chinese women like well-connected men. Many Chinese women associate good network with power and status. So, if you have powerful friends, you should let her know. Many Chinese girls aren't attracted to men who are lonely and needy. So you better have an interesting social life if you like to date Chinese women.
Now, why does this matter? I think that it matters because there is a general pattern in social hierarchies in human societies where the higher you are in social standing, that tends to correlate highly with the amount of wealth or the amount of income that you have. Now, this isn't always true. I don't want to suggest that women are purely gold diggers. I don't think that is the underlying motivation in this case. It's just that they want to date men that are of a useful quality or more useful quality than themselves. And I think if you think about this from an evolutionary perspective, it makes a lot of sense because, if you imagine a hunter-gatherer society where there's all these humans interacting, and you think about the duration of time when a woman is pregnant, she is highly vulnerable, right? So that means that male really has to step it up during that time, and that also means that he needs to be able to provide resources for her during that time as well. Okay, so you may be wondering, why am I talking about hypergamy? What the F does this have to do with a baby formula? Bro, it does, I promise. Well, at least I think it does. So what I'd like to show you guys is the sex ratio in China in 2019 by age group. Now, if you don't know, there was a policy where families in China could only have one child, and that was recently lifted. Now, what this led to is a lot of families, especially in rural areas, where they were actively selecting their offspring for males in different ways. So I'll just keep it at that. Keep it PG here. Now, what this led to is a extreme kind of a scenario where you have these ratios of men to women that are just unnatural in a human society. Normally, it's about 50-50. So what we're looking at here is to compare this to a female amount of 100. Now, if you look at the amount of males in this category, there's about 113 from 0 to 4. There's 116 from 5 to 9. There's 119 from 10 to 14. There's 118 from 15 to 19. And we're starting to get into the reproductive years of women. 20 to 24. We have a rate female to male ratio of 114 to 100, 25 to 29, 106. So I do think that this category becomes a little bit less relevant when you get into the 30s, because there's this behavior that you see in China where women become very less desirable once they get into that 30 range for whatever reason. That's my observations, some of the things I've heard and some things I've seen and read. But the point I was trying to make here, there are many more reproductive age men competing for a smaller amount of reproductive age women. Now, if you remember the hypergamous nature of women, this means that many more women in the near term are going to be dating men of higher social castes. So because there's many more men competing for the same amount of women, especially when we consider that Chinese culture puts an emphasis on family, on being supportive of the family, being able to support that family through financial means, it means that women are very likely going to be dating, on average, wealthier men than they have in the past, in my opinion. So what this ultimately boils down to in this convoluted process that I've been trying to explain is that I think that this means that there's ultimately going to be more spending on premium infant baby formula. Okay, so we also need to take into consideration that A2 milk itself, it has distinct advantages with Chinese people. Chinese people, they have a higher than average dairy intolerance. However, A2 milk tends not to share these qualities with Chinese and other Asian people as well, right? So if Asians can digest A2 strain milk on higher rates than they can A1 milk, and if we also consider that A2 milk is a foreign company that isn't tainted with the melamine scandal that took place in Chinese baby infant formula before, and that it is it is among the highest, if not the highest, premium product, when we are considering that women are likely to have higher than standard or higher than average incomes in the future because of that hypergamy, I think that A2 infant formula sales, they're just getting started.